noise!
Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. Brought to you by FunkandStuff.net, this is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine, musicologist, creative arts journalist, and multimedia pro. Whether you're watching the video version of this show or the audio-only podcast version, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in this show. If you enjoy this programming, there are several ways to help support Truth and Rhythm, as well as contribute to further enhancements and expansion, plus get some sweet perks and rewards in the process. First, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Second, join Truth and Rhythm's new membership program through Patreon, which features 3 tiers for truth believers, truth seekers, and truth crusaders. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, which is loaded with awesome content, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk, shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. Sponsorship opportunities are available as well. Contact me directly at scottg@funkandstuff.net. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm. I am pleased to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership, Keith LeBlanc, a trailblazing drummer, composer and producer who since 1979 has explored and often fused funk, rap, rock, hip-hop, electronic, industrial, and other genres. Along with being a member of the progressive and experimental band Tackhead, he has released several cutting-edge solo albums and collaborated with numerous well-known artists. That impressive list includes the Sugarhill Gang, Afrika Bambaataa, R.E.M, Seal, Peter Gabriel, 9 Inch Nails, Lou Rawls, Andy Lennox, Living Colour, Depeche Mode, and Tina Turner. Wow, Keith, impressive. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Outstanding. And where are you today?
I'm in Connecticut, Meriden, Connecticut. It's sandwiched between Hartford and New Haven, about an hour and a half from New York City. About an hour and a half from Boston.
So right across the sound. My wife is from Long Island, so.
Okay, yeah. It's quicker to get there on the ferry, actually, because I drove there once, and I know why they call it Long Island now. It's never ending.
Yeah. So how you been holding up this year? You know, how's the weird year treating you?
Well, it hasn't been too weird for me because I've been lucky. For about 3 years before this happened, I set up a studio at home and started working from home. Except for teaching and gigs, most of my recording, is by wire. People send me the tracks, and so I've been able to keep recording that way. And my wife had said, she said, you ought to, set up a studio at home, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So I haven't really changed much of what I'm doing, except when I go out, and I don kind of my own version of a hazmat suit, and but I've had to turn down gigs, you know. There's people that are braver than me that are still playing out, and I told them, I said, I just don't want to take the risk given my age. So I've been fine, really. I've been really blessed. I know it's very hard on a lot of people now, and so I look for comedy now more than anything. I look for the funny, because laughter really helps with this depressing situation our country's in at the moment. And you know, we've been in crazy situations before, you know, if you look at history. So I'm sure we'll come out of it. Americans are strong that way, but it'll be nice when the country kind of gets together again.
Yeah. Let's say it's always darkest before the light, right? So now we're going into this sort of tough winter, but there's a vaccine, and hopefully 2021, get out there and get some live music going again.
I think that possibly, because everybody's been locked down and because there's no replacement for live music, I think once things open up, I think there's going to be an amazing amount of live music everywhere. And that's what I'm hoping for anyway. Yeah. I'm hoping for like a rebirth, you know. And plus we'll have a lot more ways to do it too, you know. Everybody's been forced to use technology they're not used to, so that's becoming commonplace. So I think you have to I'd rather look at the glass half full. You know, what's good in my life? What's good about this, rather than, you know, because the bad is on the news. I try not to watch the news too much.
I'm with you. Looking at the glass half full always. And you know, the good thing about the technology, like you mentioned, is that when I first started doing this show, a lot of people weren't that comfortable with it. Now it's like, no big deal. Just hop on the video chat and let's do it. So that's a good side for this show anyway.
Yeah, I wish it was here 30 years earlier. I mean, because when I remember when I was working at Sugarhill and the first drum machines came in, you know, I was in fear for my job. So I very quickly got one and learned how to use it. But once I got one, the guitar player, Skip McDonald, that was in the rhythm section with me, I looked at him, I said, you know, Skip, one day this whole studio is going to be in a box smaller than this drum machine. And I guess about 10 years ago, I went over and I brought a portable system, Pro Tools, you know, and to his house, and I was recording him on some stuff, and he goes, well, Keith, you got your box, didn't you? You know, so
he remembered, huh?
Yeah, he remembered, thankfully. And I just wish this technology was here quite a while ago, because I was being interviewed by this some magazine. They were saying, gee, you know, because you're older, you must really hate the way people record now. And I said, no, actually, you know, I said, I love the technology. I can get up in the morning and anything I can imagine, I can try. And I don't have to leave home. And with unlimited time, there's no time restriction. Because back in the day, when you paid for studio time, even if the track wasn't working, you had to follow through and end up with what you ended up with, you know, because you had a budget and time restrictions. But
you kind of held hostage by the cost of it.
Yes. And, you know, that clock was always ticking in the back of your brain while you were in there. And it's much easier to go through borders with a thumb drive than a 2-inch tape, you know, so.
Yeah. So let's, I want to talk about that period you just mentioned for sure, but even a little before that, how did you first get into drums?
I saw Ringo Starr on TV, and I immediately made a drum set out of coffee cans. And my parents saw I had an interest for it, so they brought me a practice pad. And I joined the orchestra at school. And you know, they said a practice pad. You know, you do lessons, maybe you get a drum. So I joined orchestra at school, and there was a good drummer there, and he liked me, so he took me under his wing and showed me the stuff that he knew. And then my father had a massive stereo. I mean, back in the day, there was like a hi-fi nuts, like Lenny Bruce would say. You know, my father was a hi-fi nut. You used to have to build it if you wanted it.
Mine was too, yeah.
So he built this big one, and I managed to get a snare drum, and I found a bass drum in someone's garbage, and I got a foot pedal, and I just started playing along with records, you know, and I loved it. I was kind of a weird kid, so I stayed in most of the time. I wasn't really good at sports because I didn't, you know, I didn't have that much interest in it. So I just played drums all day to my heart's content. You know, my neighbors would complain, but not very often. And, if they did, my mother would get her trumpet out and blow it into the phone, so they never called back. So that, you know, and I just went from there, really. I think I did my first gig, I was 14. They snuck me into the club. So I was always the youngest one in the band, and I was lucky. I always seemed to play with musicians. Once I started playing with musicians that were better than me, so I actually gravitated towards people that were much better than me, and I found that was a great help too. But that's how I started. Ringo Starr. I saw the Beatles on TV, and I immediately focused in on the drums. I have, you know, and just the sound of it and everything. And then when I saw the kid at school play a beat on the drums, you know, hearing it live killed me. I had to do it.
So, and you grew up in what city?
Bristol, Connecticut.
Okay, so not far from where you are.
Yeah, which is lucky too, because all the musicians from New York that were going to do a gig in Boston, they would play in Hartford, Connecticut, which is 20 minutes away. So I was able to see some blazing musicians the whole time I was coming up, and that was handy. Because, you know, I had the rural life, neighborhood life, which was really good in the 60s, and a lot of open space. And then I could see, you know, the best musicians in the world in the park in Hartford, in Bushnell Park there. So, and they had a club not too far where I was able to see Weather Report, Miles Davis, you know, Wesleyan University. They used to give a lot of concerts. I think I saw Mahavishnu Orchestra's first gig, you know, and they opened up for Billy Cobham was in a band, and he had just left the band and joined Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I forget the name of the band. It was a big band at the time, and Mahavishnu was opening up for him. And I remember John McLaughlin came out, and he goes, "Listen to the beautiful silence." And then all of a sudden, all hell broke loose, you know, and like watching Billy, you know, shred sticks, and there's just sawdust coming up everywhere. It changed my life. I was gone after that. You know, I was off. And at that time, there were so many great records coming out, you know. So,
yeah, the golden age of fusion right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a beautiful thing.
Were you always attracted to that? I mean, because for some people, it was too challenging, you know, musically to get into, but you were open to it from the get-go?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, seeing Billy Cobham, you know, I was sitting next to several drummers, and they were just, you know, telling me, "Oh, I'll never play again. You know, I'm going to give this up." But it was inspiring. You know, you see somebody do what you're doing way better than the way you're doing it, and taking it somewhere you hadn't even thought of. It just made me want to learn it all. So, you know, I started picking apart Billy Cobham, and I really loved Jaco Pastorius as a bass player. That, you know, that's one of my bass and guitar are my two favorite instruments other than drums. I love keyboards, but you know, obviously a good bass player is hard to find. So Jaco really set the bar, you know, so guys that were good got a lot better quicker after he came out. So it was a great period to learn my craft during, you know. And even before that, all the records that came out were basically all the stuff from Muscle Shoals and all the Motown stuff. You know, that was like pop music at the time. So it was great. It was a great time.
So when did you first, you know, get into, you know, when you're first in a band context, you know, what type of material were you playing?
Oh, gee. My very first band, I mean, you know, it was, we had battery-powered amplifiers and stuff. We were trying to do Stones tunes, and, you know, and I was figuring out tunes for the guitar player, you know, but the first real steady band that I played with was a little funk band called Little Jimmy and the Soul Testaments. And we used to play in the projects in Bristol. You know, I learned all the James Brown stuff because our singer really loved James Brown, you know, and the same hairdo and everything. And then I moved on from that to several rock bands in high school. You know, but they always played things like, you know, we'd play Chicago, or we'd play Led Zeppelin, or, you know, a little more challenging rock stuff, yes. And then I joined a fusion band. The whole fusion thing hit, and did original music for quite a while. That didn't pay too good, so I started doing show band gigs, you know, where you travel around the country, different hotels, and you stay there for like a week. And, you know, it was a way for me to keep from getting a straight job. And, you know, I had a place to stay. I didn't have to make the bed, and I got to play every night, you know, so that was cool. And I did that for a while. And then when I was home, I would practice all the time, go to any jam sessions that I could find. And I went to this one jam session, and this guy, Harold Sargent, came up to me and said, "I got just the guys for you to play with." And he gave me his drum chair in this band, Wood, Brass, and Steel, which had done several records, and these guys were all pros. And so I got in that band, and that led me right to Sugarhill after that. And I started recording and learning how to really, that experience recording for, it was about 3 or 4 years at Sugarhill Records. I learned how to produce, you know, without even knowing it. And then when we left there, we had started Tackhead, and we just started using the studio as its own instrument, trying to push the envelope as far as we possibly could. So,
With Sugarhill, who brought you in?
Harold Sargent.
Okay.
He's probably one of the most sampled. He's dead now, died recently, but he's probably one of the most sampled drummers around, other than Clive Stubblefield, for all the hip hop stuff. And Harold had to leave the band. He had to find a replacement, so he got me in. And I remember I did the audition. I brought a bass drum and a snare drum, hi-hat, one cymbal. And the guys really liked me, and we hit it off right away. So, and it was great for me because Doug Wimbish and Skip McDonald have to be some of the funkiest human beings on the planet when it comes to, I mean, it was serious, very serious stuff. And it was a big horn band. And these guys had already recorded, you know, and they talk about playing in New York. And so Sylvia Robinson called up Harold Sargent because she thought he was still in the band. And he said, well, they got a new drummer, but he's really good. So we went up there. Rapper's Delight had just come out, you know, and we went up there and we started recording. The first day we went up there, we started recording. And stayed there for quite a while. And we, you know, to me, I was looking for anything new and different, you know, and rap music just seemed like a natural progression of funk music to me, or fusion music, because it was very improvisational and it was all drum oriented. It was all rhythm, so I loved it, you know. I could and, you know, I learned my craft. I was getting paid to learn how to record, really. And, you know, if they asked me if I knew how to do something, I told them yes, even if I didn't. And I just went for it. And so that was a good experience, it really was. Now young people can do it. I mean, being able to hear yourself recorded is a great learning experience. Because you hear what works and you hear what doesn't work. And nowadays, you know, young people can set up that environment for themselves at home and get that experience, where when I was doing it, you couldn't do that. So I was very lucky that I was thrown into that cauldron of recording. And then after that, when I hooked up with Adrian Sherwood, who's like mega producer, dub artist, you know, dances through frequencies like nobody I've ever heard, that just pushed the envelope even farther, you know, because I had produced a record called No Sellout, which had spoken word on it, and Adrian was into much the same thing, so we hit it off like a house on fire. And
I have to say that was a great record. I mean, I was a DJ at the time myself, and I remember getting that, you know, from my record pool, and it was great, you know.
Well, it was a great experience because I got to meet Malcolm's wife, Betty Shabazz, and you know, I was able to make sure that she and the family got 50% of the record, because that's how it's supposed to be split: vocals 50%, music 50%. So, and that was really interesting. I ended up in court with the record with Sugarhill. They were trying to steal it, you know, because I used their studio to record it. My partner on the project was Marshall Chess, whose father owned Chess Records. And he happened to be working at Sugarhill at the time. And he gave me the demo budget, you know, to come up with the idea. You know, see if it worked. And Joe owed him some money, so he said, let's use Sugarhill Studios. I didn't want to use Sugarhill Studios because I just knew, by this time I knew those people, you know, I knew how it would go down. And so when I finished the record, you know, I did it incognito while I was there. No one knew what I was doing. I wasn't signed to anything. No one paid me any attention. They just thought I was doing demos for Marshall, so paid it no attention. It was great, and I got away with it. And by the time the record came out, they had no, you know, Marshall Chess had played it for them, and I remember they didn't know what to say to me, you know, because I wasn't signed to anything, you know, and I just could see the writing on the wall. So I got in touch with Betty Shabazz and told Marshall, I said, we need a different record company. I don't care how much Sugarhill wants this record. They're not going to pay Betty, because I guess they had released some speech records of Malcolm X not long after he had been murdered, and they never paid Betty for those records. So I already knew what was going on there, and so we ended up doing it with Tommy Boy Records, and Joe Robinson sued Tommy Boy, and I ended up in New Jersey District Court, which was hilarious, but very interesting. Because the judge was the DA that investigated Malcolm X's death.
Oh, wow.
And he pulled the case when he saw it, you know, so it was fun, you know, because the guy knew that, didn't have to explain Malcolm X to him at all. So, and he was, what's his name? Judge Herbert J. Stern. And this judge, all the lawyers were like revered this guy, were scared to death of him. So I knew it was like a serious moment in time. But luckily, you know, no one assassinated me, and I got away with it, you know, and opened a lot of doors for me, that record.
Do you think that controversy helped or hurt the record?
It hurt the record because Joe killed it in the States. I mean, you know, we ended up giving Joe like 1 point on the record just to settle out of court. And, you know, Tom Silverman, you know, he basically said that, no, everything's cool now. I said, no, it isn't. Joe's going to kill the record. And Tommy said to me, he goes, well, why would he do that? He's making money from it. I said, it's way past money. You know, it's gone way past that. So Joe called all the radio stations and said, hey, man, these white boys are stealing our shit. Don't play it. Mm-hmm. So the only place it really got played was in Europe or maybe on college radio in the States.
Actually, because of my exposure to it, I thought it was a bigger hit in the U.S. than it turned out to be. Just because, to me, it was a bigger hit.
Yeah, well, it was different because there were no samplers at the time, so I did it with flying in tape. It was all done with tape manipulation. And samplers came out about 8 months after that. But, you know, when I did that, no one had thought of doing that. And I think I met the guy did that record, 19.
Paul Hardcastle.
Yeah, Paul. And I was over in England doing a session for ABC, and they told me that Paul had told them, you know, they said, how'd you come up with that idea for 19? And he said, oh, I was just trying to do a Keith LeBlanc thing. And so, you know, in all my productions, usually I get there first, and then, but the first one never makes the money, usually. It just gives other people ideas, you know, and someone will do it a lot more commercially. Happens to a lot of artists that push the envelope. And I don't consciously try to push the envelope. It's just, I'm interested in certain sounds and I go for what I want to hear, and a lot of times it ends up being a little ahead of what's going on because I don't really track what's going on. I just do what I want to hear and try to keep myself around like-minded people like that in recording situations. So yeah, I always wanted to be what I like, and if someone else likes it, great, you know. But I was never one to, you know, I'm influenced by other people's things and I love other people's stuff, but I never just, you know, set out to like take a Beatles record and line it up in a sampler and take a bridge from one part, chorus from another song, another Beatles song, and make a new song out of it. Like, what was that band? Oasis. They did a lot of that. I think they should probably pay the Beatles some publishing. And, you know, because I don't know whether they physically did that, but it sounded a lot like the Beatles to me. I was like too much like the Beatles.
Yeah, where do you get past influence and toward something else, you know, infringement. But, you know, I wanted to ask you, Keith, you know, so you have pushed the envelope, and that's a tribute to you for sure. But, you know, how do you decide whether something is too much maybe for yourself personally versus whether others are going to get it?
I've never really, well, I just do things till I like them, till they feel good to me. And these days with the technology, I can throw 50 tries away before I get the one that I want. And I don't care what anybody else thinks. I really don't. I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. Of course I want people to like what I do, but I'm not disappointed if they don't. I understand. I mean, the last real album I did, it was a combination of so many different styles that I had trouble getting any press on it. They said, it wasn't in a nice little box. But I have done things that have become in a nice little box. They just haven't come out yet. One of them is a record I worked on for years with Marshall Chess. I took a lot of the old Chess songs and redid them with great players. And I got Bernard Fowler to sing all the vocals. And it's just absolutely off the chain killing. I love it. And anybody that's heard it loves it. So hopefully, we were supposed to have a summer release, but COVID hit and everything. So everything got pushed back. But that will be coming out on BMG when it does come out. And it's all fits together perfectly, and I think the first album I did, which was called Major Malfunction, everything fit together perfectly. I stole the Beatles' technique of running one song into another song, non-stop side, and me and Adrian were doing all kinds of crazy things on that one in the studio. I'd take a tape, and I'd have Adrian mix some beats of mine, and I'd record them on a half-inch tape, and then I'd flip the tape over and run it back, and then have Adrian record another beat of mine, and I'd take it in and out of record in time. And took a lot of, I had people, just come to my studio to ask me how I did that, things like that, but it's a really fun time, and I never, sometimes things just came together, and they all fit together nicely, and a project will, if you go in and you take that leap of faith, a project will come up with its own name. All the titles will rise to the top, and you'll know what fits, and at the end of the day, it sounds like you planned it all that way. And, but really, all I'm doing is just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But fortunately for me,
I want viewers to know that came out in '86. In case they want to look for it, Major Malfunction, and that track "Move" was a highlight for me on that one.
That was a track that Al Jorgensen threw away. He didn't like it. I programmed that for him on Fairlight, and he said, I hate this track, because we were trying to do some stuff for us. He was doing an album for Twitch. I think the album was called Twitch. And Ministry was the name of the group. And he didn't like the track. He had done the keyboard part, that very recognizable, lovely keyboard part. And he said, I don't like the track. And I said, well, can we have it? He goes, yeah. So when I put it on Major Malfunction, I didn't use the whole track. I just used bits of it. I called up Al. I said, well, how do you want me to credit you on the album? He said, call me Dog. So if you look on the album, the keyboard is by Dog. Later on, he called me. He said, why did you call me Dog on the album? I said, because you asked me to, brother. What do you... But he was a crazy boy. I loved Al. He was out of his mind. But yeah, we were trying everything to make tracks for him for that album, and he hated everything we were doing, So we ended up with a few tracks off of that. But I love that track. I think it was one of the best things Al's ever done, as far as concept, the whole thing.
Yeah.
That he was doing. And the sound of the Fairlight is pretty interesting, you know, for what it was at the time. Very, unlike the Synclavier, which was the only other sampling keyboard at the time, it was dirty. You know, it had a dirty sound, almost like, you know, a heavy metal guitar. So
More of an industrial quality.
Yeah. And then if you got someone like Adrian Sherwood mixing the stuff, you know, when I first met Adrian, you know, it really took me a while to get used to the frequencies he was using, you know, because I never heard bottoms so low in my life. I never heard tops so high in my life, and everything in between. And he was actually able to move things in your audio sphere with just EQ. He's an amazing guy on the mixing desk. He plays it like an instrument, you know. So I've been fortunate to work with a lot of great people, you know, and have access to great musicians. And
what would you say makes Doug so special on bass?
Well, he really knows how to record. You know, he started out recording with Woodbrass and Steel at All Platinum years before I met him. And when I met him, you know, he was like the perfect bass player for me. That's what I thought. And but what makes him special is he'll play like a producer in the studio when he's recording something. Like a lot of those lyrical lines, those lyrical bass lines on those Sugarhill records, just out of his head. There would be room, and he would put in an added line. And so he played really musically, and the sound he got out of his bass, because it's very hard to get a clean bass recording. It takes a lot of technique to play a bass clean in the studio, because you hear everything. You know, you might have a great bass player on a gig, you know, sounds great. You get in the studio and you hear all this garbage, you know, and it's as well as the bass. So the fact that he really knew how to record, and he always approached everything really musically and did the best thing for the track, I think that's what I love about him the most. Not to mention it, I mean, you wouldn't know it hearing him with Living Color, but Doug can play the serious funk on that bass, and he can play jazz. He can play a lot of stuff. But most people that know him probably haven't heard him do that type of thing very often.
Yeah, we can definitely hear it through Tackhead and the Sugarhill stuff.
Yeah, but he can stretch way farther than that, and that's I think if he couldn't, you know, both Skip McDonald and Doug Wimbish both could play any kind of music because they wanted to be session musicians. So that's what I loved about that combination. There were no holes barred, no stretch too far. And if you approach everything musically and play for the music, you can hang in any kind of situation, any musical situation. So that's the main reason. Just no ego, just playing real music.
I definitely need the viewers to realize that you guys, you know, played The Message and White Lines, right? And
yeah, I did a hi-hat overdub on White Lines, but that was mostly Reggie Griffin. And Reggie Griffin put together a lot of The Message along with Ed Fletcher, the percussionist. And Doug and Skip played on The Message, but I didn't play on that.
Okay. Did you guys
left Sugarhill by then?
Did you guys ever play live at all, or was it purely studio with Sugarhill?
We played live all the time with Sugarhill.
Okay.
And I learned a lot doing that. We played with all of the best bands of the time. You know, Roger Troutman, Fazo, Kool and the Gang, War. Um, we opened up for Parliament-Funkadelic for about 6 or 8 months, something like that. Got along really good with those guys. And Cameo. We even did a. I didn't know it, but later on when we started doing Tackhead, every time we put out a record, Prince would come out with a record. They had like the exact same beat I had put on a record. You know, I'm real close. You know, and this happened quite a few times. And we did our first run of gigs in the States with Tackhead. We got booked in this club, and it was we were told that Prince was going to be there. And you know, we played the gig, and there was no one in the place. It's like a big white building, you know, and big auditorium and everything. And there's like 2 people in there, the staff, you know, and they were saying all day long, Prince is going to be here, Prince is going to be here, and no one's there. And after Prince died, I saw a picture of his house, and that was the place we played. We thought it was a club. And I was playing, you know, we're playing, and I'm running a drum machine, so usually it was maybe a hi-hat or maybe some sequence tom-toms, you know. So we'd be at a steady tempo so Adrian could dub it and he could set all his delays and everything. And so, you know, I'm playing and my monitor goes off. And I had some headphones, you know, in case that happened. So, I'm playing with one hand, I reach for the headphones and I just get it to my ear and the monitor comes back on, you know. So that happened about 5 times in a row. And then the last time it happened, the monitor came back and then this voice came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of the monitor. It didn't come out front speakers, like somewhere in the back of the stage. And it was Prince. And he goes, "What's the matter? Can't you keep time?" So I think, I didn't even know it, but I think I was auditioning for Prince. I mean, he booked us in his house.
What year was this?
This is 80s. Got to be like 86, 87, something like that. And I didn't know it was his house till, you know, he died and they were showing his house all over the news. But, you know, you figure, you know, the guy was hooked in, he had everything hooked up and he had a club in his house, you know, with a stage and everything, you know. So we wouldn't have known it wasn't a club. They just had us pull up to the back. And we went in, stayed in the dressing room until it was time to play. So I failed my Prince audition.
I think that's where he did stuff before Paisley Park opened, right?
Possibly.
So.
I mean, I remember it was, you know, it just looked like a regular club, and all day long people were telling us Prince is going to be there, and they were right. He was there. He was just watching from a camera somewhere in some little room, you know, because a guy like that definitely had everything wired, you know, and had the money to do it back then. So,
you know, when I was listening, one track in particular reminds me of a Prince track, and that is "Kill the Devil," which the rhythm to that sounds a lot like the Future that he did for the Batman soundtrack.
Okay, there you go. I mean, I liked Prince's stuff because, well, I would check it because most of his albums I didn't like a lot of the songs on them, but he would always have one killer that just killed me, you know. And I would always look for that killer, you know. A lot of the other stuff might have been a little too flowery, you know, and out there, but he always had a few killers on the albums. And I think that's, you know, that's what a lot of people looked for, you know, just so in your face. And I don't know how he could, you know, his persona and everything, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, I'm not brave enough to do that. And you're talking about a fearless man here, you know?
Yeah, that's funny, Keith. There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.